What's going on, everyone? So a lot of people were telling me about this, but I saw this before Mark Cerny's interview with Digital Foundry. There's also another presentation that he did over here that is the PS5 Pro Technical Seminar. It depends, like I kind of find this to be less irrelevant compared to what he's telling Digital Foundry. This is cool if people want to learn about, things. If you're only in the console world growing up on consoles right now, you don't really understand how this stuff works. But this is kind of what I want to highlight. They also did a reaction to this too, so we have a lot to cover. And this is very important because Mark Cerny tells you what PSSR is, uh, why they built the Pro, what's the reason for it being a mid-gen upgrade, and is PSSR going to be for PlayStation 6? I'm going to give you guys a quick little tease about that. No, it's not. It's specifically designed only for the PlayStation 5 Pro. And what do I mean by that? Well, we're going to find out. So to give you just another little highlight, basically that's just a label that they want to use specifically as a image upscaler specifically for the Pro. So that means that what you're getting with the Pro is pretty much what that is. Don't expect to see that type of same aspect happen with the 6. They're going to try to make something else and give it a different label. So we're going to get into that. Like, comment, subscribe. Let's see how this works. All right, y'all. Continuing.
We've gone hands-on with PS5 Pro. We've taken a look at a number of games under the microscope, and we've talked about the PS5 Pro over hours and hours of content. But what we haven't done is sit down with some of the people who have made PS5 Pro and some of its software actually possible. So today I'm sitting here with Mark Cerny, the lead system architect for PS5 Pro, and Mike Fitzgerald, the core technology director at Insomniac Games, for a quick chat about the PS5 Pro. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
And when this video is published, you should be able to watch a full version of Mark Cerny's PS5 Pro presentation that I just saw in person live here at the Sony headquarters in California. So that should provide some context for what we'll be discussing here today. But I just wanted to start off here by talking about PSSR, PlayStation Spectral Super.
So for all the people that were saying RDNA 3, RDNA 4 did not want to listen to me, I was trying to tell them it is not RDNA 3 and it's not RDNA 4. 33.4 teraflops, behind the DLSS, like, shut up. No. So you see right here, it's RDNA 2. So.
Per resolution. There has been a little bit of a difference in terms of approach between some developers like Naughty Dog and some other developers like, for instance, Square Enix, in terms of the kinds of modes that they're offering. So some developers are basically offering many modes, many toggles like Insomniac, whereas other developers are using PSSR as an opportunity to basically homogenize their existing modes into one ultimate PS5 Pro mode with all the high frame rate fidelity that people are looking for. So what's your kind of position on managing these two things? And do you guys have kind of a way of thinking about that or a preference for certain titles in terms of targeting those different aspects?
I mean, my preference is that the game developers do what they feel is best for their titles. So this is really a question for Mike.
Yeah, I'd say, when we make a game and we work as a whole studio and team on delivering it, we're making some really tough trade-offs between what we want to present at a higher frame rate and what we can present at the 30 frames per second lower frame rate. So the nice thing about being approached with new hardware is that suddenly those compromises we made while shipping the game go away. And so we're able to bring together a lot of what made the fidelity mode on the base PS5 and what made the performance mode on the PS5 Pro. Yep. Now, after spending some time doing that and having a really nice performance Pro mode together, people's attention start to turn to, well, maybe some people still want to play at 30 frames per second. We do have this nice new piece of hardware. What other fun things can we do about it?
Yeah, so I think it probably does depend a lot on the game because for you guys, you have so much ray tracing in there that you can pack into all kinds of different configurations. Whereas I think a lot of developers are going to be in a position where it's like, well, we can deliver a good 4K image. Now we can deliver it at 60 FPS. Maybe that's the way to go with just one mode, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and I knew there would be a lot of different strategies. I was upfront about this in that first video I did, is there were 6 games that were shown. And the first 3 is like, you can do the almighty mode. And then here's 3 other titles that do something completely different.
Okay, I also wanted to ask
So you see what he was saying too, just to highlight what they just said the past 2 minutes. He wants the developers to find out the problem with PSSR and hopefully fix it. Not only that, but what I find interesting is like him talking about the games. It's like, yeah, but you did those games on purpose because those are not super demanding games like Ratchet, Spider. Right? You seeing cartoony, animated, kind of Nintendo-like games, and an old game like Last of Us because you didn't want people to really see other things with newer games. I was like, come on, man, be better than that.
Just another question about PSSR. We've seen from developers that there have been a wide range of upscaling factors that are going into this PSSR
This is
process.
important.
We've seen in a title like Alan Wake that's doing 864p to 4K. In other titles, like in the Insomniac titles, maybe it's more like 1440p or 1584p to 4K. Is there kind of guidance that you have with regards to those upscale factors at the moment? Is there a kind of preference from the Sony team, or is it kind of like roll your own, see what kind of image quality you get, and that ultimately is the thing that should decide your approach?
I'll talk a little bit about the tech we're developing, and then you can talk about how you're using it. There's a lot of research going on there. We support one mode that covers a range of 2 to 5 to 1 to 1 to 1.
Okay.
And whether that's an ideal long-term strategy or not, we're definitely talking about it. And we're looking at the low end of the range and the issues we see there versus the high end of the range. So I really wouldn't take that current 2.5 to 1 as any sort of indication about where we'll be years from now.
Yeah, I would say a lot of it depends too on what you're moving from. So the TAA that we had been leveraging as a studio and still do was really well suited for about 1440 up to 4K, but really struggled but when it got down closer to 1080, 1280 in that range. And so PSSR behaves very well at that range, and for us, it's the big improvement and gives us an.
Okay, so he made it very clear the way that PSSR is designed. Definitely when he said the 2.5 to 1 and the 1 to 1. He's talking about if the upscaling is going in the 1440p range, it works best there. If it goes down lower than that, it's not going to be performing as good as you would see with DLSS, TSR, XESS. They have a specific range for it to work, but that makes sense because it's kind of fixed in a way, and they can only like put it on a certain pattern. Kind of like you have this little pattern right you see in my hand, and they don't want to go here or go like this. It works best here. 1080p can be fine too. But that's why you see games like Alan Wake when you're doing 860p upscaling to maybe trying to go to 4K, you're going to see some issues. You see the blurring and all that. Yeah, because PSSR is designed that way. Once again, I try to tell people this is a PSSR issue. This is the way Sony's system works. They were sitting there arguing with us the whole time, trying to blame the developers. Now you can shut your mouth and never say anything again. Because what I find funny is all these people are trying to defend Sony, and I try to tell them that that's the way the PSSR actually works. And that it's not a full enhanced AI upscaling system with fully integrated aspects. Like you see a fully integrated GPU on PC, a fully integrated CPU standing alone on itself with all the watts that it would need. Also fully dedicated tensor cores, fully dedicated NPU aspects. All that together, it could upscale in any aspect and be in full integration, whereas this is specifically designed for that only. Just to explain that to y'all, and I'm not attacking people that want to understand. No, y'all understand, y'all know how it works with the fanboys and all that other stuff. But yeah, let's continue. That's very interesting.
An opportunity to spend our time differently there.
Yeah, that fur on performance RT.
Yeah. It struggled for me as a player playing at home in the performance modes that we had on the base PS5, and so to see that quality come back.
Yeah, so PSSR, it's basically your kind of first implementation here of a machine learning based upscaling model. And I think we're seeing, that for sure people are doing pretty wide ranges in terms of those upscaling factors. But in the future, are you potentially looking to even increase those upscaling factors or maybe be delivering better quality out of PSSR, out of a new version of PSSR perhaps? Like we know that so far there have been some improvements in that PSSR iteration over the time pre-launch. So will that continue in the future, do you think?
I mean, we're definitely continuing with development of these ML-based libraries for game graphics. It's just that there's so many targets to go up against. Like, I was in that talk today, I was also going over frame generation, frame extrapolation.
Intel did that.
Ray tracing, denoising, and the like. So What order and what focus? Those are really good questions.
You see how he mentioned denoising because he knows about the PSSR issue with the noising coming on the screen and the shimmering.
Additionally complicating this, of course, is that we announced Project Amethyst with AMD today. Right. So it's not just us developing the networks. We have a partner that we're doing it with. And of course, what the partner...
You see what he just said? This is what I've been trying to tell people, that what PSSR is an AMD tweak that's specifically for Sony, designed specifically for the PS5 Pro GPU. It's not like it's fully integrated on its own. No, it works off of, it uses the GPU resources to work. And they're using TAA that he was talking about earlier. So that's going to use more resources of the GPU to make the image quality look better. So it's not designed to give you insane frames like DLSS. It's designed to make the image quality look better, save you a little bit of frames, but not enough to give you a huge boost. Sometimes it may use a little bit more, but you're going to get that image quality increase and hopefully not the shimmering. And that they've been working with AMD to do it.
Feels about that technology direction and where the focus should be is also very important.
Okay, so in that vein, on PC at the moment, we have a lot of technologies, like you mentioned. We have frame generation. We have lots of AI upscaling models. We have people even talking like Intel about possibly frame extrapolation models. Mm-hmm. We also have models like DLSS ray reconstruction, which are doing pretty profound things to the makeup of a game image in real time in a pretty lightweight manner. So these are areas that you're possibly exploring. Is that what you're saying for future PSSR upgrades? Is that what you're thinking about?
Oh, definitely. Well, it wouldn't be PSSR. It would be, well, so PSSR is PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution.
So it'll be different branding. Yeah, Spectral's branding.
Spectral is our branding for the ML libraries for graphics, just like Tempest is our branding for audio.
Right.
Okay.
And so it's going to be Spectral something for all of that. And yeah, we're definitely looking at what it would be that Spectral something, if not Super Resolution. But Super Resolution is a very good place to start.
Right. And then in terms of that
So, you see what he just said? It's not no DLSS. It's specifically designed for the PlayStation 5 Pro to be called that. That's the first integration. That's what you're going to get with the Pro. He just told you that. So, if it's going to be something for PS6, it's going to be different. It's going to be integrated differently at launch.
PSSR, in terms of the way that it's implemented on a per game basis, that's something that developers will presumably have to go and patch in new versions of PSSR, right? Because you wouldn't necessarily want new versions of PSSR kind of in the mix there without a title update, or is that something you're thinking about?
Well, there are a lot of interesting possibilities there. And I know, honestly, I don't know at this time. You know, it's wonderful to think that the game could say it's okay to update, or a user could make a decision to update. Just how all of those pieces fit together, I don't know.
From a developer perspective, you know, I think we can look at our games differently a lot of the time. And I know some developers would say, I don't want the system to touch what I have confirmed looks good to me and players. And other developers would say, oh, your system's going to go and make my game look better for people without me having to do anything great. So there's options there.
Yeah. I think with PSSR,
and he's telling the truth. See, this is interesting. So Sony's not even involved. They want the developers to figure out everything, and they're just saying, here's the system for PS5 Pro. This is how it's going to work. Guys, that's something to think about. That's why you saw certain developers saying, here, you could just turn off PSSR. It's getting on our nerves. And then, you know, you see like people using Unreal Engine 5, definitely like Epic, definitely with games like Fortnite, and you see what's going on with Call of Duty, you're like, we're turning on TSR. We like your hardware upgrade because we could just tweak those specs because you just didn't upgrade like in PC, so I can do these settings at higher settings. And then we're using our AI upscaler that actually works. And it's not limited to this. Not that Sony's AI upscaler is necessarily bad, but this is the first integration. And now that we have a lot more answers from the official source, I love this video. This is great. This just shuts down everything else too. And just proves that I was right this whole time because I always know what I'm talking about. I don't know how many times I have to do this on my channel. And I've been doing this my whole life with people too. I always know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to misguide people, trust me. And if I make a mistake, I will admit it. But yeah, now you guys kind of get this idea. So basically, what Microsoft is about to get, I don't know if y'all know, they're going to be getting FSR 4.0 from AMD. That's going to be better than this. So I don't think there's going to be a huge difference between the Series X and the PS5 Pro. There's not already technology wise. They just have a little bit of a better CPU, a couple thousand more teraflops. But that was the difference between the five and the Series X base. But if developers are not taking advantage of that full integration, then you're not going to see or notice a difference. Sometimes one could perform better because it had better market share, and then we get more money off of that. That's why you saw that happening, by the way. Otherwise, math is saying the Series X was definitely more powerful, and it should not be performing worse. That's it, because math already says it's more powerful. So if it's doing that, then the developers are doing that because they don't want to waste resources on doing a Series S, fully optimizing an X, unless Microsoft gets involved or pays them. So, but when we see FSR 4.0 coming, if it's performing that much better than PSSR, the Series X and the Pro upscaling comparisons, you might see some interesting aspects. So the difference of purchase is that whether you want Game Pass if you don't have a PC, or do you just want all the exclusives on PlayStation, you don't care because it's just money doesn't mean much, and you just buy whatever you want. So that's what it comes down to. If you want to get both, get both. Or if you want the PC to play Game Pass at higher settings like I'm doing, and I still own my Xbox too because I like supporting consoles. It's like I own every PlayStation and Nintendo. You could do that. This is just to give you guys an inside look so we can get our answers, so we can understand how systems actually work. This is awesome. I love this video.
So a lot of people are pretty interested in a certain kind of problem, which is that you have a pretty tremendous improvement in image quality. And I think we see this across, different kinds of PC upscalers as well when we're talking about that. But the internal resolution of that imagery might not be changing that much relative to what you saw before. So are you guys kind of trying to figure out how to message that to people and tell people like this is a profoundly improved image despite the fact that the internal resolution is comparable? And I know that we're part of this problem for sure. So that's a tough thing to message. But have you thought about that?
You're not part of the problem. And I've heard you talk. I spend too much time on DF, but I've heard you talk about how you really shouldn't be looking at internal rendering resolution and drawing too much in the way of conclusions from that. You really need to be looking at image quality. And I was trying to communicate exactly the same message today, is we need to change the way we're talking about resolution. Yeah. Maybe we shouldn't be talking about it at all. The difficulty is if you don't have a number, right, it gets very hard to have that conversation.
Yeah, I think we tried to get away from it at some point by just maybe stop telling the numbers and start using like some kind of model that would tell people what the approximate image quality is. Yeah. But it's a big challenge because like you're trying to communicate different things, and resolution is an important part of that at the moment at least. But that final image is ultimately what really matters to people. And I think
that's very true. And I think that's what people can get confused about, because you're telling people that they're getting 4K, but what does that really mean? Because then you're looking at the PC 4K, you're like, damn, man, he's blowing that 4K out of the way. And then you look at the Xbox 4K, and then like you see Nintendo come around the corner and watch how they do 4K. But how is that being done? How is the image quality really being like this? Because you have all these different sliders, you have all these different beta AI upscalers, you got frame generation, you got these other different systems that work like TAA and aspects like that. You got AA, you got just so many things, and he's actually right about that. So if people really understand what type of 4K they're getting, it'd be better than just telling somebody you're getting this when really most of the time it's just fake 4K and it's not real. So I think the resolution talk compared to how systems really work is definitely something to be considering.
That's what we're seeing with PSSR for sure. One last question about PSSR here, and this relates specifically to your work, Mike, is that one thing we saw with PSSR in Ratchet and Clank in particular is that it appeared to improve the stability and resolve of RT reflections. Is that something that you've seen across other titles that you're working on? Obviously, you have 4 titles on PS5. Yeah. Is that something that you would expect would carry over to other games, possibly with RT reflections, where that PSSR process, or whatever inputs are being fed into that PSSR process, are producing a better result with PSSR?
So ray trace reflections are an interesting challenge because they are a composite of multiple images in the frame, right? That pixel that has the reflection, it's partly the window that is reflecting the thing, or the mirror. It's partly the thing that's being reflecting in the picture. And so with the information you feed into an algorithm like PSSR, you're limited in how much you can describe about that one pixel. So an example would be if you're passing the depth buffer in to tell the PSSR, how far things are from the camera.
Oh
You
shit!
can't tell it
I'll
how
get this
far
napkin.
the window is and how far the reflecting thing is and how far the thing behind the window, right? There's layers of this. And so that's what makes that a unique challenge is as you turn the camera, you have some velocity information about how the window is changing, but maybe not information about how the reflecting thing in the mirror is changing.
Right.
And one thing is that can be really hard to encapsulate in an analytical algorithm like TAA, where you're sort of limited in how you express that kind of thing. So I think that's one of the areas we were hoping to see improvement is PSSR in a trained model that has more capability to perhaps recognize that type of situation or adapt to it.
I'd like to move on now from PSSR onto the hardware, and maybe we can discuss some of the things we saw in the presentation indeed there as well. When designing the PS5, one thing I was struck by in the presentation is there was not as much of a kind of organizing thought, I thought, around the PS5 Pro, like kind of the why rather than the how a little bit. With PS4 Pro, it was very much like we're going to target 4K displays. Here it seems much more like you're achieving an enormous improvement in the power level of that console. But did you have a certain kind of game experience in mind to deliver to players when you were designing this console? Or was it like, we're going to achieve big power improvements and the developers are going to show players what that looks like?
It's a mid-generation release, so really the target is better graphics. And, it felt like the big three were the right things to go after. Larger GPU, more advanced ray tracing, and the ML. Mm-hmm. So, not that complex.
Yeah, it's not that complex, but I think what we've seen so far, one really compelling thing, I think, is getting those fidelity modes, those 30 FPS modes, basically at 60 FPS with comparable image quality, very comparable looking visuals overall. So that is for sure something that is sticking out in this early batch as well as ray tracing enhancements like we're seeing in the Insomniac titles.
Yeah. Also personally speaking, it's been just great digging into the ML aspects of this and gaining some knowledge there. Because we know that's the future we're heading into. And so what an opportunity to gain all of that knowledge with the Pro, rather than waiting for the start of a true generation and having to get everything right with no experience whatsoever.
Yeah. One interesting thing about the PS5 Pro, it's obviously...
So he's letting you know he's not the master of this. There's a lot to learn here. And people didn't know Series X had machine learning day one. Look into it. Not only that, actually, I'll do it for you guys. That's where people were getting that 33 point whatever teraflops for PlayStation 4. I was like, yeah, but Series X could do the same thing. Watch this. So you know it has 12.2 teraflops. So yeah, the Series X has over 24 teraflops, right? But you see the PS5 has 16.7. So if you do that times 2, you get that 33.4. That's where they were doing it. I was like, guys, the Series X had that day one. It's not RDNA 3.4. And I tried to explain that to them, and they were trying to argue against that. I was like, no, Microsoft Ben had that. Sony copies a lot of things they do. Like, people just don't understand that. They do. Just because they're selling more hardware don't mean that they're doing better in every other department, because I'm telling you, they're not.
Being upgraded in a ton of respects. You've got improved memory, improved storage, obviously a massively improved GPU, but the CPU is staying roughly the same as we had before. Now, there is a clock bump that developers can tap into there, but it is, broadly speaking, a very comparable CPU there. Why wasn't the CPU upgraded, and why was not such a big focus there?
It's really just a question of where you put your resources. I wasn't seeing, and I didn't think I would see, that many titles that couldn't run at 60. That's kind of my litmus test. Yeah. I'm not asking do all the games run at 120 at this point in time. I'm asking do all the games run at 60. And you can count smart. The AAA exceptions on one hand, I think, for games that didn't eventually run at 60. And so it seemed if we threw pretty much all of our resources into the graphics, that would be the best approach.
Right.
And say as a developer, the day Mark comes and says, hey, we want to give you guys a presentation about what we're thinking about for the next hardware. Like that's a fun meeting for everyone. And we were very happy with where the focus was here, GPU wise.
Yeah. With regards to the machine learning hardware in the console, do you essentially see that as kind of a solution for a problem that we're seeing across the industry, which is that you don't get good cost scaling on new silicon nodes anymore? You aren't getting that massive driving down in the cost per transistor that's enabled us historically to increase the power of consoles. Is machine learning, ultimately, is that going to be the answer to that question, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully
Yeah.
everybody watches that video that we were talking about, because that's precisely what I was saying is rasterized rendering, and I don't have a better word for it, but the strategies that we had up through PS4 Pro or the like, that is, I wouldn't say it's reached a limit, but mostly it's about making the GPU bigger or memory faster. And so, as we look to the future, the improvements will be ray tracing. Ray tracing, I think we're going to see a lot happening there. And
It has a lot of work still.
we can get done with ML.
One last question here on the PS5 Pro hardware itself, the way that it's been configured. We seem to know roughly that you're targeting similar clocks in the GPU as in the base PS5 model. And you might have some issues possibly with running up against power constraints in this model in possibly a more significant way because the model itself has a much larger GPU. So is it the case that maybe developers will have to deal with a little bit more of a variable clock speed in that GPU?
That's a great question. It's pretty much identical. So PlayStation 5 capped at 2.23. PlayStation 5 Pro caps at 2.35, which I did not talk about in the video today because it's just such a distraction. I don't want anybody doing flop math based on 2.35 because at the end of the day, we go in and when we do the set design, we tune the set design so that the games are running at about 2.17. Right, we don't want it to get too bulky. We don't want to have the fan have to be too large or the like. So
you saw what he just said. He's saying you're not going to use that because he doesn't want the console to get in overheating mode. And it's better to keep the PS5 and PS5 Pro about the same, but with all the other technology that we have in there with the bigger GPU, a little bit more RAM, and upscaler, we don't see a need to do that. And if a game needs to do that in the future, it's possible that it'll be dynamic, most likely. That's very interesting.
I mean, that 2.35 is really a red herring. I don't think too many games will get up to that too often.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask some more, I guess, general questions and maybe a little bit more philosophical questions possibly from this point onwards, because I think we've seen from your presentation that you have a really clear vision for what the PlayStation 5 Pro looks like. And obviously you've delivered a compelling piece of hardware there. But I do wonder a little bit about something in the presentation, which is that you kind of positioned the PS4 and the PS5 and the PS4 Pro and the PS5 Pro as existing along separate tracks. One down the left-hand track as generational leaps, and then the mid-gen refreshes on the right, the enhanced consoles. Now, we're in an era where developers are shipping cross-gen more than they ever have. But does that chart reflect that you still believe fundamentally in generational leaps, going from one generation to the next generation, big changes in software, big changes in what people can deliver on that hardware?
So we're not making PCs. We're making a few very specific things, right? How many types of PCs are there? I mean, you can't even answer that question because you can combine the components in any way you want to.
Yeah.
So the Pro consoles are very tightly targeted. I mean, you're seeing around GPU. But when a new generation starts, then it gets opened up to what are we doing with the CPU? What are we doing with the amount of memory? What are we doing with haptics? It's a whole new experience that the developers can go out. And I think it's really helpful, even if we drop words like revolution from the conversation, I think it's really helpful if the developers have that thing to consider and can ask the question, okay, this game, yes, it'll ship on one, it'll also ship on the next, but how can it be a different creature for each of those? Not gameplay-wise, but in terms of the visual experience. Good influence.
Yeah. So for you, really that distinction and the distinction you kind of want to maintain is that on that enhanced side, you're talking about bigger GPUs, better graphics, that sort of thing. But on the generational side, that's when you're really trying to talk about fundamental paradigms like how fast is my CPU? What kind of haptics do we have there? Okay, that's the kind of fundamental difference there. We are talking about an era where rasterized performance improvements are maybe not as important as they used to be back in the past when they were extremely important. And the use of upscaling technologies is changing the way that we perceive a lot of those metrics.
Well, it's not all going to be rainbows and path tracing.
Well, exactly. So
we see
along
that.
those lines, actually, the PS5 Pro still has 67% more WGPs or CUs than the outgoing PS5. So this is not, like, even though this is the future possibly of graphics rendering, a massive focus on AI and ray tracing, It's not completely here today, is it? Because you have to make some of these changes.
Sure. I mean, what was that like? Because you had a moderate boost for the raw graphics performance, and then you had a much better boost for the ray tracing. How did you tweak the engine?
Well,
for that?
the nice part was that those things stacked together in a really constructive way. So we were able to use the faster ray tracing performance to get some time to spend to drive the upscaler further. And this came just the more sizable GPU came back to cut frame times down. So I think they stacked well for a game that was designed for the base PS5 and already had little bits of each of those pieces.
Well, I liked it because
Okay.
very simplistically looking at it, it's faster, and so you've just sped up your rendering, and now you have 5 milliseconds to spend on whatever. And so why not spend them on improving your ray tracing or adding a new widget or whatever? Like, if you're making an engine, nobody is ever coming to you and saying you now have 5 milliseconds to do whatever you want to do. That's just gravy, right? That doesn't happen.
It's pretty
You're
rare.
desperately trying to get to 60 frames per second.
Yeah, that was one thing in the presentation that I thought was quite compelling, which is you show like your 11 millisecond or your 16 millisecond workload on PS5 becomes an 11 millisecond workload on PS5 Pro. Then all of a sudden you've got this big chunk of frame time left over looking very scrumptious. And all of a sudden you can devote your resources to tackling ray tracing, to doing machine learning upscaling, doing a lot more on the hardware.
Yeah, that is pretty good. People usually don't do stuff like that. I think that's a kind of a genius move. But that's pretty much it. I'll probably do a second part for this, a little bit of this PlayStation video over here to explain some things that he's talking about. But you guys kind of get the point here. So now we have our answers about why he didn't do a CPU upgrade, how the PS4 Pro actually works, what is their focus for a next-gen console compared to a mid-gen upgrade. PSSR is being very limited to what it's doing, but it's still, what it is. How they use the same GPU settings for both consoles, and the importance of machine learning and ray tracing, and how they want to continue to work with that, and knowing that what the PS5 Pro has is specifically only for that. The PS6 is going to have something different. So we got our answers with that, and now we know that he even admitted it, that we want developers to figure out everything, and whatever issues are going on, we hope you can get to it right, and that if you go outside that range that we say which 1440p being a sweet spot, then you will see that noise and all that other stuff. That's why in some of these other games, you see they're only showing off certain type of games that work for that. They didn't show off everything for that specific reason. So now I fully have my 100% answer for seeing it with my own eyes and understanding all that. This is a long one, but this is good because then we learn and we have our answers and we know how everything works. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what y'all think. All right, y'all, glad to do this. I'll be bringing y'all more so we can fully understand everything. Peace.